Welcome everyone to our webinar on working effectively with your boss. My name is Shrey Desai and I am from Univibe Network, the host of this webinar. This webinar has been specially designed to help you build and maintain a great relationship with your boss by managing expectations, commitments, and clear communication. Sesha's unique method of a saner approach, and saner being an acronym in this context, will enable you uh, with some simple tools and techniques which can be implemented on a daily basis to achieve your desired relationship with your boss. Without much further ado, let me introduce our esteemed expert, Sesha Dhanyam Raju. Sesha has a strong track record of over 25 years in IT services industry, having performed a variety of cross-border leadership roles. Sesha is an author of several successful blueprints which have been published worldwide. Some of the companies where Sesha has played key roles are Digital Risk, Emphasis, EDS, and Digital Equipment. Sesha is a graduate from IIT Roorkee and earned his MBA from Ross School of Business at University of Michigan, USA. Before we begin, I would like to remind you all that you can send in your questions using the question section on the control panel to the right of your screen during the course of the webinar. We will take these up one by one post Shesha's talk. Our best attempt would be to answer as many questions as possible. We hope that you enjoy the webinar and take home some key learning which you can implement immediately. I would now like to hand over to Sesha.
Thank you, Shrey. Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this webinar on the fascinating topic of how to work effectively with your boss. It is no secret that in order to navigate the career maze, one must be able to work effectively with his or her boss. Effective working relationship with the boss can have a multiplier effect on the performance of the employee and the boss and the team as well as the whole company. Therefore, it is in the best interest of both the company and the employee to have employees and bosses having an effective working relationship. How does one create an actionable plan for an important part of one's career? While it is true that not one size fits all, and the exact plan and the exact actions that one must execute are contextually dependent. However, the following may broadly help. And in order to best understand the audience demographic, I would like to request Shrey to do a quick poll of the audience. So Shrey, can you please quickly do a poll of how long have the employee been working with the boss? Okay, thank you. I think it's a very interesting response, the pattern that we are getting. It appears that roughly around third of the audience has been working with this boss for greater than 3 years, whereas and the other 1/3 portion has been working from 1 to 3 years, and the remaining between 0 to 1 years. So thank you all for doing a quick uh, web response or on the poll on the live webinar. Appreciate that. So this is interesting, and this is something that is not atypical, if you will, right? We find ourselves in a situation where either we are new to the relationship with the boss is new, or sometimes we may have had longer tenure with the same boss. Irrespective of the situation where we find ourselves, we do need to realize that ineffective working relationship with the boss can not only lead to lower performance of that what we can put up, it can also be a situation where it can lead to increased stress. It can lead to missed opportunities, both for us and our boss, and for the company and the team as well. So the framework that I use to help create an actionable plan to manage the effective relationship between a boss and a subordinate is what I generally describe as the saner approach. A saner approach is essentially a mnemonic which stands for some of the actionable execution tools that you could use on a day-to-day basis. Which of these tools to use, with what frequency, and how, I leave it up to you to be the best judge. But the hope is that you will be able to use this comprehensive toolkit to further your own career progression at the workplace and to have a mutually beneficial relationship with your boss. This approach has been arrived at based on significant research and based on personal experiences of my colleagues, myself, and several other highly effective employees at their workplace. So let's understand each one of these terms of this mnemonic and see how can we apply this to our context. The first letter of the saner approach stands for the surprise quotient reduction. One of the big things that we all must remember that it is never in our best interest to surprise our boss. You know, it's better that the boss gets timely updates from you on whatever has been the area that has been assigned to you. Now, you could be an individual contributor who has been assigned a set of tasks. You could be a middle manager, or you could be a senior manager. It doesn't matter at which level do you find yourself in the organization hierarchy. It probably is universally accepted that most bosses would not appreciate getting surprised about an update, especially so if the update happens to be negative. Sometimes employees make the mistake of trying to hide the update if the update happens to be a negative update, and they hope that nobody ever finds this, and the boss probably will never even realize that so and so update has gone negative. Unfortunately, in business, usually these types of things have a very uncanny characteristic of rearing up at the time when you least expect them to. So therefore, one recommended tool that I suggest that you please adopt is that you need to try to guide yourself to say that, look, if I am going to be having a situation in whatever has been assigned to me, where there is an update, where there is a negative, where there is a missed deadline, or there is a cost overrun, or there is a customer dissatisfaction issue, or whatever the issue might be, you basically try to guide yourself to say that, look, I'm going to quickly bring it up to my boss's awareness as soon as possible. Now, certainly, this may result in the following. The boss may get terribly disappointed, and the boss may even, take some exception and give you very critical negative feedback. However, please understand that the impact to the entire organization could be far greater if you hide it. Now, there could be some other benefits actually, apart from the fact that you're not surprising the boss. By doing this technique of reducing the surprise quotient for your boss, you can actually gain some benefits as well. One of the benefits that you will demonstrate is that you are willing to co-opt the boss. Sometimes the boss may actually bring a fresh perspective on how you can recover from the situation. Sometimes the boss may act as a sounding board with whom you can brainstorm a particular thought process and say, this is where I went wrong, or this is where the situation is, and how can we recover from this? So that's probably helpful to the cause. The second thing that this demonstrates is that you are open to feedback. You may have done something which was a mistake, and you are open to feedback on what you could have done differently. And that in the long run will help you. So the first, again, tool that one could use is called as the surprise quotient reduction for our bosses. The next important tool that often gets overlooked by employees is employees and bosses view that the responsibility of giving feedback is that of the boss, and the responsibility of the employee is to receive the feedback alone. Actually, it's the other way around. Bosses have their own share of blind spots. Bosses are human. They are susceptible to making mistakes. They can have their fears, they can have their biases, they can have their pressures, which may make them good candidates who can benefit from coaching that they receive from the subordinates. Now, most bosses who are effective at the workplace and who have a successful track record, they do welcome feedback from subordinates, and they essentially give the subordinates the opportunity to express feedback. Now, as we did the poll, we found that there is a wide range, if you will, of the amount of the number of years that each one of you have worked with the boss. So therefore, what I would suggest is that it is prudent to understand the boss's style. It is prudent to invest some time and energy to understand how does the boss best operate before you start going on a rampage, giving actionable feedback to the boss in a way that may not be welcome. So it's best to understand the style of the boss. How does this boss prefer? Is this boss an introvert or an extrovert? Is this boss more formal or informal in his or her style of working? How does the boss prefer feedback sessions? Now, if the boss has not set up a process to receive feedback on a regular basis, you may want to approach the boss and say that, look, how would you like for me to come to you to give you some updates on my project? And during that update process, you can also put your feedback messages right there. But please do understand one other important aspect. you are not trying to do this in a way that makes the boss look bad, actually. And if you do it with that intent, then I would suggest that please don't do it, because that's not the intent of this tool. The intent of this tool is that you have taken a genuine interest in making the boss successful. You have taken a genuine interest to say that, look, this boss is having a blind spot in this area, and it is my responsibility as the employee to help him or her overcome this blind spot. Now, it's very important for us to have the right intent behind this action, because more often than not, this intent will show itself up in how we provide this feedback. And so what we are trying to do is to help the boss. Now, the boss may be doing things that he or she may not even be aware that they are doing it that way, and that's why we're calling it as a blind spot. Okay. And do it in such a way that you actually not only just provide a feedback and leave the boss hanging high and dry, but try to give an actionable suggestion plan to the boss to say, maybe this is what you may want to consider incorporating in your working style. Bosses who get this feedback in a sincere and authentic manner from their subordinates end up actually improving their own performance, and thereby having a multiplier effect on the teams that they are in charge of. Again, the very important point to note is the intent with which we are offering this feedback. In fact, in one high-performing team, I have found the first and the second tool being used very effectively. It started with the boss, and when the boss first came on to this particular team, what he instilled upon in the team was a process whereby the team would send him monthly updates on the accomplishments that each team member had. And this was like a private one-on-one communication between the subordinate and the boss, where the employees would list their accomplishments in the form of key updates. And they would also suggest and there would be a question which would be asked to say, hey, what are the things that we should stop doing? What are the things that I should personally be doing better, and I should, or what am I doing better that I should continue to keep doing? So that, and therefore the employees use this as an opportunity to reduce the surprise quotient for the boss and provide regular feedback and regular updates, as well as using the opportunity with this monthly updates to provide feedback every month. Now, in another high-performing team, where we are talking about the very senior level team in an organization, where you're talking about the C-suite of employees, even at that level, the boss instilled a practice whereby they gave feedback to the boss at least on a quarterly basis in this case, and on a half-yearly basis they would actually create a big comprehensive essay, if you will, on the key accomplishments that they and their teams had. So let's move on to the next tool. I call it the next job syndrome, okay, and that is the N. The issue that comes up, and this is based on interviews conducted of several bosses, they feel that their employees sometimes are not putting in the best that they can. What I would like to suggest for each one of us is, whatever assignment is assigned to us, let us view that as our own turf. Let us view that as not as a tick in the box where I show up in the morning and then I check out in the evening. I essentially view that as the best job that I've had today. Now, it may not be the real best job that you wanted to do, and you may say that, look, when I do this, I will go into some future dream role, right? My recommendation though is that please do not try to save your best and say that, look, when I get to my future dream role is when I will be able to make a difference to the workplace. And no, actually, in fact, you will be able to gain significant amount of goodwill at the workplace. You will gain a true coach in your boss and other leaders at the workplace if you demonstrate that you are putting in the best that you can and you are working to your full potential in the current situation. Now, you may not have all the necessary tools to be able to perform the job. You may not have all the skills that are necessary, and you may have some training gaps. However, what is more critical is that you bring in the best attitude that you can, which is significantly in your control, and give the current job the best that you can. You know, if you are a follower of the game of cricket, for example, and if you are a batsman, and then you keep, if you keep saying that, look, if the ball is pitched at that sweet spot for me, I would be dispatching the ball to the boundary, and that's when I will really, unleash myself. Yes, that ball may come and present itself to you at some point of time during the course of your innings. But what you got to deal with is the ball that is being bowled to you right now. And you got to, if that ball is a good length ball, which forces you to defend in an appropriate manner, that's what you do. And therefore, you put in the best that you can to that current situation. And that is what I will call as the next job syndrome. We'll move on to the E of the Saner approach, which is what we will call as emotional bank account deposits. Just like you have a bank account where each one of us is familiar with bank accounts right from our childhood days, and you understand how bank accounts work. You go and regularly make deposits in this bank account, and at times of need, you make withdrawals. Similar to that, at the workplace, you can visualize that there is something called as an emotional bank account. And this emotional bank account essentially requires for you to make significant deposits in that bank account, which are essentially, these bank accounts are nothing but the working relationships that you have between yourselves and your colleagues, between yourselves and your bosses, and between yourselves and your customers, etc., etc. So essentially all your stakeholders. Now, the more deposits that you can make, the greater is your ability to make withdrawals at the times of need. One thing that you need to be careful about, though, is that we are not making these deposits to actually circumvent the situation. So in other words, we say that, look, oh, I'm going to have excellent personal relationship. We are going to make the journey fun. We are going to have a lot of play time. We are going to enjoy the company of our colleagues, our bosses, and ourselves. And it's like a very friendly atmosphere that we have created, and we have made significant investment of time, energy into that process of setting this up. All that is fine. However, an effective boss and subordinate relationship is one where both parties, the boss as well as the employee, are comfortable in drawing a clear distinction between the personal aspect of the relationship and the professional. And therefore, if you have had a relationship with a boss for a number of years and you have gotten to know each other well and you enjoy working with each other, that should not come in the way of having tough conversation regarding project deliverables in a very tangible manner. And the most effective bosses are those who actually would be calling spade a spade and basically telling it the way it is. And rather than trying to do themselves and their subordinates a huge amount of disservice, and to say that, look, since I enjoy a good personal relationship with so and so person, I'm going to try to always protect that employee. It doesn't work to the success of the organization, to the success of this boss and this employee relationship. In fact, the boss may erode significant credibility in the eyes of other team members if the boss does do this, where he or she shields a particular employee because of the higher amount of personal relationship quotient that they have. So this is what I would call as the emotional bank account that one must focus on. And last but not least is what we would call as the risk quotient. Now, the risk quotient, now the concept of risk and harm is very contextual and very different. For an individual contributor, I would like to suggest that you start with the following approach. You basically try to understand as to what is it that your boss's KRA looks like. What is it that your boss's bosses expect from your boss? What is it that your customers expect from your boss? And if you are able to, again, in a very genuine and authentic manner, go to the boss and pick, if there are 5 problems that the boss is working on or 5 priorities that this boss is working on at a given point of time, if you are able to take one off of that boss's plate and essentially allow the boss the bandwidth to focus on the remaining, then the boss not only would personally be very thankful, the organization would be very thankful to the fact that, you know, this particular problem has been taken care of. And trust me, this when you do these types of actions where you're able to reduce the risk to the organization or to the boss, not only does it help you in your working relationship with the boss, it helps you in the long run, because you begin to get a reputation of somebody who can take tough problems and actually deal with them. Now, as you go on and achieve greater I guess seniority in the organization, as you move on to greater responsibilities in the organization, as you start taking charge of certain maybe divisions, certain functions, certain regions, certain customer relationships, it becomes quite effective for you to be able to, you know, communicate to your boss to say, boss, okay, this is a big important event that is happening, or there's a big customer deliverable that's happening. I got it, and let me take this problem and let me do the best that we need to do as an organization. Now, of course, it will be extremely foolhardy on our point if we basically try to, you know, have an attitude whereby we say, oh, I know it all, I can just do this and the boss need not interfere. And then you may run the risk of actually taking this project downhill. And if you have taken it off of the boss's plate, but unfortunately the results were far from what they are supposed to be. So you do take the boss's guidance from time and again. You do report on the progress in a measurable manner so that there is no surprise to the boss. But at the same time, you're able to reduce the risk quotient of the boss. Sometimes the boss, because we discussed earlier that the boss may have their share of blind spots, they may take a decision, or they may be making a decision that may be very harmful to the organization at large. So by the risk quotient, if you are being true to this particular tool, then that requires for you to speak up, that requires for you to try to figure out to say, hey, boss, you know, this while you are making this decision, have you considered all the potential pitfalls of this decision? Now, the boss may not be aware of the pitfalls, so therefore that may help the boss to incorporate your feedback and into his or her thought process. So once again, the tools that I have given to you today, the S stands for reduction of surprise quotient. The A stands for actionable feedback. The N stands for next job syndrome. The E stands for emotional bank account, and the R stands for reducing the risk quotient of the boss. There are a couple of other foundational tools that are so-called prerequisites for executing this toolkit. And they are honesty and integrity. The basic premise here being that the boss and yourself are trying to do a job with full integrity, trying to do the job with utmost honesty. Now, sometimes we may find ourselves at the workplace where that may not be the case. And if that is a situation where you find them yourselves in, then I would suggest that you need to deal with that very quickly, and you need to deal with that in other ways. Basically, in some cases, that you may have to report that particular situation to other officers if you find that there is some issues going on in how the boss is operating, which may be called as questionable integrity, or the boss is operating in such a manner that is not honest. Then you have an obligation to yourself and to the organization to report that to the appropriate agencies within the organization. But by and large, the premise is that most of us wake up to try to do the best that we can. Most of us would like to progress at the professional, at the corporate world, and our bosses would also like to see us perform at our very best, and our bosses would also like to see that our employees are able to give us the right feedback, whereby they are able to improve their own effectiveness. So I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to leave the rest of the time for this webinar open to conversations, so that we can have a dialogue around what you have heard today, and how actionable do you think this toolkit is in your own context. Thank you, and over to you for opening up for the questions.
Thank you, Sesha. So we have our first question from Mayank. He says that his boss likes to hold his work close to his heart, and he gives him very meager tasks or not many great responsibilities. So how does he tackle this issue? So what I think is that there might be an issue of delegation over here. So Mayank wants to know how can he tackle this issue.
Thank you, Mayank. It's a pretty important question that you have raised. And many a times, the bosses may operate in this manner because of some biases, because of their prior experiences, or sometimes because they have not been adequately been trained and they are not equipped properly to handle their job as the boss. Just like it's your job to learn how to do the job given to you, it is the boss's job to learn how to do the job that has been assigned to them. Okay, so what I would suggest that you do is that don't try to go and confront the boss in a public place or in a public setting and try to say that, look, oh, you never delegated anything to me and hence I'm unable to give in the very best. Try to find opportunities whereby the boss is sometimes having a particular situation where you might want to say that, look, I'm having certain time at hand, may I be of help to you? I'm not asking for anything in return. All that I want is an opportunity to be of value to you. You start by contributing to the boss's effectiveness thereby. And if the boss thinks that, look, this person is coming to me with no strings attached, right? The bosses can actually see through that. Now, sometimes some bosses may not be able to overcome that situation at all, right? And they may just get stuck in their own scenario where they find it very hard to delegate, right? And they sometimes can fear that if they delegate, the outcome may not be as effective as if they did it themselves. I would like to suggest that it might be a situation where the bosses need to start trusting you, and the bosses need to start seeing that there is more to Mayank, if you will, than just the particular situation.
Thank you, Sesha. I think Purvesh has the exact opposite question. He's talking about how to deal with managers who have a tendency to micromanage.
We've all had our share of that, and there is just like there is a requirement for us to be able to understand how to work effectively with the bosses. There is a focus of another webinar where we'll talk about how do you become a better manager and a leader, right? And however, since the demographic of today's audience is such that we have wide variety and experiences in the audience, you might yourself be a manager. You might yourself find yourself that you have direct reports reporting into you, and you have a boss to report to as well. Why does micromanagement occur, right? Let's start with that as the basic premise. Sometimes the boss may actually not be very confident about the fact that, oh, I would like to I'm not getting the regular updates, or my surprise quotient is very high unless and until I micromanage. Now, if there is a way for you to provide that actionable that surprise quotient reduction to the boss in a different manner, then you could actually reduce that micromanagement. So one potential suggestion, again, it depends upon how you apply it in your context, could be as follows. It could be that suppose when the assignment has been given to you, and if suppose the assignment is that, look, let's take a software development example, and that you are supposed to develop so and so code. You may want to ask the boss when the assignment is being given to you to say, hey boss, how often would you like to receive an update on this? Because I would like to see that I am satisfying the desire or satisfying the need that you may have to get regular updates. But having said at the same time, as the situation is that it may require for me to go and research, it may actually help me grow myself if I'm able to view this as an independent responsibility, and I'm able to come to you without the need on you to having to come to me every hour, every 5 minutes, and trying to get an update from me as to where do I stand, where do I stand. So that might be an action that you may take. The other action that you could potentially take could be that, depending upon the situation, the area that is assigned to you could be very critical, right? And to the boss at least. And the boss may feel that, oh, this is an area that I have to get heavily involved, because this is the biggest thing that is going on in our company or in my life right now, etc. Right? So if that is the situation where you find yourself in, you may find that the boss is having more time delegated to this. So the way that you could potentially do this is that, say, every morning you have a 5-minute update call with the boss to say, hey boss, here is the plan for today. I want to run this game plan with you so that you can focus on other things for the rest of the day, and then I will check back with you at the end of the day. So if you basically take it upon yourself to have, like, say, a 5-minute conversation in the beginning and a 5-minute conversation at the end of the day, that may, or even like, you could have a 5-minute conversation during midday, if you will, right? And that way you're having 2 or 3 times conversations where that that's an update time for you to go and talk to the boss as to what's happened over the last 4 or 5 hours, and then you report progress, and then you go back and you do your things. So that way you are shielded from the fact that the boss will keep showing up on your shoulder every 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Hey, what's going on, man? What's going on? What's going on? And so that's why instead of that, you're taking the the problem statement by its horn and essentially going to the boss proactively, telling the boss that, look, I want to run the game plan for you for today. Here is what we are going to do. I'm going to come back to you by midday to report progress, and you can therefore focus on other things. If I run into big trouble in the meanwhile, where I need your help desperately, I would need your permission that I can quickly barge in and say, hey boss, here is where I'm stuck. I need your help. I hope that helps.
Great. Okay. So Vivek and Joydeep have a very similar question, and they're talking about, in principally, they're saying that their boss is good, but sometimes when they work too much, and then there's a perception that okay, this person is ready to do extra time, and as a result of that, the boss gives a lot of work and expects a lot of extra time from them. And Joydeep even mentioned that once he had a very heated argument about this with his boss. So they're looking for guidance on how to manage this situation.
Yeah. One of the issues that we find ourselves in, by the way, every action plan that has been suggested in today's webinar is one that has actually not been taken from a textbook, if you will. It is something that has been either observed directly by me or other colleagues or other effective leaders I have observed, or they have come up based on research of experiences that other people have had in this place. So what we find ourselves in a lot of these types of situations is there is, in the real world, bosses are assigned to a particular role. Let's start with the basic assumption that they were the best people to be given that job. Okay, let's start with that fundamental trust, if you will. Now, it may or may not be the case. The case may be where the boss himself has to significantly unlearn and relearn new skills to be a more effective leader. One of the things that bosses need to respect is that actually employees' effectiveness is far greater if the employees can have a work-life balance, if the employees are not burning out, because it is to their detriment if they find that employees are actually leaving because they are not able to withstand the pressures of the job, and they are able to, they are just getting burnt out because of so much of demands that the job is imposing upon them. So what it might be helpful to the cause is to understand, to say, is this situation with this boss, is it a one-off situation, or is this the way this boss regularly operates? Then what you may want to suggest to the boss is to say, boss, why is it that we are always in this, under the gun, if you will, trying to do this last minute where we all have to put in so much amount of hours, and are we impacting the productivity of our outcome? Are we impacting the quality of the outcomes that we can produce? Because just by putting in more hours doesn't necessarily guarantee that we'll be able to do a better job, because each one of us have our limitations, right? So therefore, one must understand the root cause, right? And one must try to understand, to say, is this problem with this boss something that has suddenly come up, right? Or is this how the boss has always been operating? Sometimes it's also helpful to understand, suppose this boss, and I don't know the situation specifically in this particular case, but one could try and understand, to say, is this a boss having, say, a lot of functions under this boss? And if suppose so, and if that is the case, then you could talk to other teams who are also reporting to the same boss to understand how they are dealing with the same situation. Sometimes it could be helpful to find a counsel in HR to find that, look, I would like to brainstorm the situation with you. How best should I deal with the current situation? Because many a times HR's, is assigned with the responsibility of trying to understand what is driving employee retention, what is driving employee engagement. Because all said and done, the bosses are very hungry to get good scores from you, and they are very hungry to have loyal, committed employees who are there for the long run, because bosses don't want to invest the time and effort keeping on hiring new people, training them, and then because it takes a huge amount of learning curve for the boss, for the employee to come to their optimal efficiency. So therefore, it isn't the best interest of the boss to retain you. It isn't the best interest of the boss to have you not getting burnt out. Now the question is, how can you help each other, from avoiding that? I'll give you a personal example where we used to have to deal with a situation where there was a huge deliverable that used to come up every few months, and that was a quarterly affair. Now we know that used to come our way, and it was up to us to figure out to say, hey, do we try to make it in such a manner that the last few weeks are always stressful for everybody, or can we plan our activities in such a manner that we know that since this is going to come down the line, therefore we plan it in such a manner that we adequately balance it throughout the quarter, rather than trying to make it as a rush for the last few weeks. Excellent questions, by the way. These are all fascinating questions. There is no one size fits all, and every situation may be very different. And I'm very glad that you're asking very pertinent questions.
Thank you, Sisha, on behalf of the audience. So Akshay has another very interesting question. He says that he and his boss are of the same grade, and he feels that his boss, as a result of this, is very insecure about his position and does not share important updates about the projects with him and treats him as a second line. He only shares what tasks he needs to get done from Akshay. And as a result of all of this, he misses the overall picture, as in Akshay misses the overall picture, and he's asking how should he deal with this situation.
Shrey, one interesting, I think, trend that is coming up for all of this, I think we need to do another webinar for bosses, if you will, on how to be more effective in their job, because there seems to be a significant need for bosses to become better at the job that they have been assigned to do. It's a topic for another conversation in different context. But let's come to the situation that what we can do in our relationship with this boss. What might be of help is that if the boss has instilled upon or instilled a process within the team whereby the boss is collecting, say, feedback on a quarter or a monthly basis, where they're asking each employee to submit one-on-one feedback and updates for their projects, then this could become part of that update on a regular basis, where the employee can actually express this opinion to the boss to say, hey, I'm feeling that significant, or I'm only being privy to certain aspects. It will help me to be more effective and contribute more to the workplace if I'm able to get to know the following things. Understand the one thing, right? Sometimes employees get caught in the trap saying that my managers are not sharing with me everything that is on their plate. Well, actually speaking, managers are not required to, number one. Number two, it may not be relevant in the eyes of the manager to share that piece of information with you. And third, which is a very important aspect of a managerial role, is that managers are supposed to take the brunt of all the different stimuli that are coming their way, and then they are supposed to filter as to saying that, look, I want to shield my employees from this particular thing, because that may actually derail them, and therefore it may not be in the best interest to share this particular information with my employee at this point of time, right? Having said that, many a times they may be doing so because they are unaware that they're actually doing so, and they may be unaware to have a good judgment as to what is it that is worth shielding and what is it that actually can make the employee contribute more to the workplace if that information is shared. Now, if you are able to create an environment or contribute to the creation of an environment wherein you are able to increase your effectiveness to the workplace as a result of more information being shared to you, then you may actually find that the boss is willing to share more information. Now, one suggestion I gave was you can probably incorporate in the quarterly or monthly updates to the boss. The second thing that you could do is that maybe at the end of your team meetings, you have, say, 5 minutes where you basically say that, look, we would like to hear from you, boss, as to what's going on in other aspects of the job. You don't make it as a personal situation where you make it your desire to learn, but you could make it as the team's effectiveness being raised as a result of boss sharing some other details that may be relevant. Or the third thing that could be done during team meetings is that you may say that, look, we have heard a rumor XYZ, boss. Can you please help give us, your version of this particular situation? Is this X or is this Y or is this Z? I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that was great. So we, talking about feedback, I think one of the participants has put up a very interesting question, Hitesh. He's saying how to deal with rigid bosses, the ones who are not receptive to feedback at all.
Excellent. Very, 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 very good question. First thing first, do not bottle that situation to yourself, in the sense that do not create an environment within your brain to say, oh my God, I have so much of feedback to give and nobody to take this to. Correct? And I'm not able to give this feedback to my boss because he or she, that person is so rigid. Okay, that don't do that, because you'll unnecessarily hurt your performance. You will impact your health, and you would create a situation where it may not be most effective for you to continue. Remember that you are there for the long haul. You are there. Success at the workplace is, I often call it, it's like a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you need to have the stamina to be able to endure the length of this marathon, the duration of this marathon. Therefore, you need to find a constructive outlet for all of these types of feelings. Now, you could think about it the following way. Maybe you may find that, look, a peer of your boss or your boss's boss, or maybe even like few layers up in the organization, right up to the CEO of the organization, you may find that sometimes you may have certain point of view that may help the organization at large, or that team at large, or the division at large to do something which is different or better. Or they may have done something that you really like and you are in support of that decision. So one strategy that may work is that if you start by creating like a letter to that boss's boss, or to the CEO, or to the head of the division, or where you have observed certain thing, or where you have a point of view, and you give a feedback to them, and you write to them saying that so and so, I am so and so employee, I'm in this division, I just happen to be very curious, and I actually was fascinated by this particular decision or this course that is going on in your turf, if you will. And I have a point of view that you may find helpful, and just send it to them. And if suppose, actually, let me reuse the word when, because more often than not, you will get that feedback. It's not a matter of if you will get the feedback, it's a matter of when you will get the feedback. You may find that you are in a situation where this other not so rigid manager is able to respond to you directly and say that, hey, wonderful suggestion, that was great, keep it coming. Then what you do is you take this, and hopefully this particular person and or you have both copied your boss, in this exchange, because then the boss can say, oh, looks like this particular employee has got something very constructive, creative ways to approach a situation. And why am I not benefiting from that experience of or that insight that this individual has to give? He is just giving insights to my bosses or to my CEO or to my division head. Maybe I should also benefit from the same thing, and you may actually find that this boss's rigidity may actually come down. In fact, this has been practiced in many organizations, and the employees who have tried this have actually found uh, their position at the workplace significantly being enhanced as a result of the acceptance that they receive for the ideas that they have. You may be a great idea person, and you may be running into a situation where your boss is so rigid that it is his way or her way or the highway, right? It's like that they operate, and you then look for other ways for this boss to try to see the value in somebody coming with some suggestions. Now, if you keep going to the same rigid wall, hitting it with more force, it may not yield the right result. Sometimes it may take other techniques to get to that. The other way to do that also is sometimes you may find that you are in, say, water coolers with during the water cooler situation, you may find that you're talking to some peers of your bosses or boss's boss. If he has called for a town hall, you may give some ideas there, and the boss's boss may, if the boss's boss says that, oh, wonderful idea, I would like to hear more, then the boss may suddenly also think that, oh, I should also probably benefit from this insight that this gentleman has.
Great. I think we have time for just one more question, and I'll take that from Abhinav Sharma. He asks how to manage his boss who is more inclined towards his colleague because that colleague has developed a personal relationship with the boss on account of flattery.
Mm. Yeah. So, if there is a situation like that, where, and we don't know, right, as to why this particular boss has got this type of relationship with this colleague. It could be because they have, as you described, personal relationship on account of flattery, or it could be that they have worked together in the past where this employee has been very effective with this boss in that particular environment and has produced the result that have really been distinguished, and therefore the boss has developed a respect and a rapport with that employee. And it is expected, right, that we may find ourselves walking into a situation where we are the so-called new kid in the block, if you will, and there is somebody already in the team with whom the boss has got a longer-term relationship, right? So our competition is not with others, right? And in fact, there is just a cooperation here. It's not competition here. What we need to look for is that you obviously will not be able to tell the boss to keep telling the boss to say that, boss, you are more inclined to my colleague, but you're not spending so much time with me. The boss may say that, look, but that's more important to me right now, and I don't need to go and spend this extra mile with you. So it's a matter of time. I don't know the personal situation of, in your case, where how long has been the relationship between you and your boss. Are you new to the situation, or is the boss new to the situation? And so therefore there is a little bit deeper that one has to go into before being prescriptive, if you will. However, the general guidance that I would give is to try to observe this, to say, is this towards a specific colleague only, or is it that everybody else is getting adequate attention and not you? You need to ask yourself that question, to say, because that may tell you that, look, I'm this boss is more inclined towards several other colleagues of mine, and somehow or other I'm not getting the right attention. That could be one problem. The other problem could be this boss listens to nobody but just goes to that one person all the time, and that is creating a sense of ill will. Now you may, therefore, the power of this actionable feedback toolkit that you give to the boss is that if you go to the boss on, say, a quarterly basis, monthly basis, request a one-on-one and say that, look, boss, how is it that we can actually get a fair share of your time? How is it that I can actually contribute to problems that may be on your plate, and wherein I can reduce the risk to you or to your organization, and let me contribute in that way. So make yourself more relevant to the problem that the boss has, and maybe that may help you. Somebody suggested one time, so going into a situation where it was new to them, they went and told the conversation to the boss as follows. They said, boss, I think the environment in which you find yourself and in which I find that you're operating in is full of roses and thorns. Can you please direct my attention to the thorns that may be pricking you? Because I would like to see if there is a way for me to take care of that thorn. You have your roses, great, keep them. You have your other thorns, keep them. But may I have the opportunity to take one thorn away from your back, if you will? And that creates significant goodwill. You're not asking anything in return. You're not saying that, oh, give me that rose, don't spend so much time with that colleague, don't incline yourself towards that colleague, but just tell him that, look, I would like to take care of that thorn. I'm telling you, that way you can actually create significant goodwill because you're doing it with the sincerity of your heart, trying to make the boss look good.
Thank you very much, Sesha. I think we had a great session with a lot of great questions as well. And overall, thank you, Sesha, very much for the wonderful webinar. I hope the audience has gained great insights and tools and solutions to their immediate challenges. Many thanks to all of you for being attentive, the wonderful questions, and enriching this webinar. We would soon be releasing more in-depth webinars by Sesha, which would be delving deeper into this topic, and also like what Sesha mentioned about being a good boss. If you're interested to know more about this, please do write to us, and you can also mark your interest in the feedback form that will appear shortly once the webinar ends. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and please do not forget to fill the feedback at the end. This will help us deliver more webinars to your expectations. Have a great day, and goodbye.
Thank you so much, and thanks for joining at a short notice. And good luck and with applying the Saner approach in your workplace, and have great success at the workplace and in your own personal lives. All the best.
Thank you so much.